Hello, everyone, on this Tuesday afternoon. We are honored to bring back our partnership events with Santa Monica Cultural Affairs and the Annenberg Community Beach House and kick things off this summer with another virtual Pride event. Before we get started, we wanted to acknowledge that the land that Toby and I are broadcasting from is the occupied and seized territory of the Tongva, Gabrielino, and Kizh people. The Annenberg Community Beach House in Santa Monica also sits on the unceded land of the Tongva and Gabrielino people and the Chumash people as well. Toby and I are thrilled to welcome Clove Galilee, Cultural Affairs Supervisor for the City of Santa Monica, for a quick introduction. Welcome, Clove.
Thank you, Monica. Welcome, and thank you for tuning in to the second annual Red Hen Press Pride at the Beach reading. I'm Clove Galilee, Supervisor with Santa Monica Cultural Affairs and the Annenberg Community Beach House. The Annenberg Community Beach House is a public destination on Santa Monica State Beach operated by the City of Santa Monica, and it is open to all. Pride at the Beach is a literary program of Santa Monica Cultural Affairs presented by the Annenberg Community Beach House and Red Hen Press. The Annenberg Community Beach House and Santa Monica Cultural Affairs were thrilled to continue Red Hen Press literary readings virtually throughout the COVID lockdown, bringing contemporary authors of poetry and fiction into your homes. Today, we continue our virtual programming with 5 incredible LGBTQ+ writers who will share and discuss their work. In the fall, the Beach House will continue its cultural programming with Journey into the Labyrinth, an in-person exploration of sand labyrinths and mindfulness. We invite you to find out more about the cultural programs at the Annenberg Community Beach House by visiting santamonica.gov/arts/beach-culture, or sign up for Santa Monica Cultural Affairs monthly newsletter to learn about artist opportunities and our local community of artists. Again, thank you for joining us today, and thank you to Toby Harper and Monica Fernandez of Red Hen Press.
Thank you so much, Clove. It's always so great to be working with the City of Santa Monica, and we look forward to returning in person to the beautiful beach house soon. Bye. For now, our events do remain virtual, and we're so happy to bring this fantastic Pride event to you today, featuring Judy Grahn, Joe Jiménez, Carlos Allende, and Kazim Ali, with moderator Ching-In Chen. Welcome, everyone.
Hello, everyone.
Hi. All right, we're going to start the event with some readings from each of these incredible authors before Ching-Yi takes it away with the conversation. Up first will be Joe Jiménez.
See you after the show.
Bye.
Hi, everybody. Welcome, or thank you for welcoming me. I'm from San Antonio, Texas, and I'll start out by telling everybody happy Pride. Today, I want to read a couple of poems. The first one I'll read is about smoke. Then I'll read a poem about rattlesnakes. I'd like to end with a poem about affection. Wood smoke. If I could kindle a flame out of water, it might cost the doors each of the locks, which is my plea deal with godlessness, protection, entryways, keys. Once I built a fire out of a sofa because the world was cold and our house gave no heat. But once I fashioned a fast flame from saliva, I no longer feared ending my life like my father's, that fence wire, mesh made of belt loops and charcoal, coats, 10-gallon hats and gloves, buckles from when we were boys. Have you never seen a man's whole body glow? Have you never seen love falter? A falsetto, a phone note. It is beautiful to win, to bring out the best in a man, pero ten cuidado. But be careful, I tell these shadows, as they take small cottons from my mouth and listen to their milk. And I tell them you are glistening, and I tell them you walk too damn fast. And did I tell you about the hatchet my father handed me, hacking combustion, whole slabs of upholstery flaring into ember until ash. It makes and unmakes me. The smokes give and forgive. But ashes? Shit. Those fuckers take and they take. The second poem that I'll read, I wrote in 2014 in response to the Ayotzinapa 43. These are teachers who were kidnapped and murdered in Iguala, Guerrero, Mexico. Allegory of the rattlesnake. Under sun, in debris, a cascabel hums, its whole nautilus of fangdom and scales, a harmony. But it came for us, we said. We heard, and we'd heard. They'll come for you. They lash out. Animus is to pain. And when it came as demon, as menace, as monolith, they as Goliath, everything we heard about rattlesnakes, cascabel made of God, but less godly than us. Understand this, anyone can suffer. In my most Mexican self, I understand the sun built a fire, for he once was a god who said the body cannot be dispensed unless I allow it. So I kneel. So I show the sun my slow throat and hope he can fathom me whole. I'd suckle obsidian for a chance at wholeness, but ardor, but fear, Ayotzinapa, but prayer, Ferguson like Juarez, until I learn to unlove arrangements that make me, until I hold a man in my mouth like a mouse or a cricket, a white moth, a whole hair. It is no surprise we refute wholeness of those we believe will do us harm. He deserved it, we said. Look at this shit he done. What was she wearing? Had it coming, so many of us agreed. Because fear is not an accident. Ego hissing, bravado that is blabbering, Cascabel's teat pink suit, its fang wilt and coil, fiasco of scales and long rope, under debris and sun, my body and his body, your body, her body, their body. On the asphalt, on hillsides, in trash heaps, in rivers, in fires, in a great desert, as demon, as menace, as monolith, they as Goliath, anywhere in the world, anyone can suffer. And the last poem I'll read is a short poem. I truly believe that if there's one thing that can save my world, and I believe save the world of many people, it's the idea of cariño or affection. Some nights I just want to hold a man in my arms because this would make everything better in my life. A comfort I frame, biceps and all of my Mexican tattoos, my bulldog chest and stuttering lung, whispers that come only from another man's scalp when the whole world inside him is a fingernail, or quiet like a small bucket of snails. Even when I'm a remolino, more so than especially I wish my kiss tenderness, enough to make a man's heart burst into 1,000 desert owls. Wing beat, featherness, beak prod and screech. Last week, I was a pendulum in a fantasy, versatile, swinging back, forth, into, deeply. Being entered is when I know I am human. Being entered is when I know I am part of something bigger, again, equilibrium, evenness. And here it is. I've come here to love breath in my bones when skin falls off the world. And who doesn't carry some sort of trap on his knuckles? The moment inside the body when joy is not born as much as it is made out of anything the rest of the world doesn't want. These are 3 poems from my collection, Rattlesnake Allegory. My name is Joe Jimenez, and I'm saying hi from San Antonio, Texas. Thank you very much, and happy Pride.
Ah, yes, wonderful.
You read it again?
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. I'm outside. My email is super wonky. The power's out in my house, so I'm going to read briefly 2 poems. It's Gay Pride Month, but it's also, I don't know who said this, but someone said, instead of gay pride, shouldn't we have gay rage? So I'm going to offer you some gay rage, actually. This poem is called Inquisition. Those who acted like Lisbon was a letter written directly to them. I had to remind that the Inquisition reached all the way across the water to Goa and flayed Indian bodies open. We are, by violence, this language given. In every place, a sun body can now so sweetly envelop itself in water. I am the boy underwater, hoping somehow to breathe again, this pin-up boy for sin, who wants to devour, but ought to be himself devoured, having had already too many lives. Forgetting to be reborn, I don my cape of blades to steal into the capital of loneliness, knowing no one there knowing whether I am a believer or a betrayer of sound and the language of water. I was not born into it, but coaxed it from sky and seed. I usurped from the riverbank its inheritance. My own gospel is still that night in the cold autumn of Portland, Oregon, having just learned of the assassination of Rabin, and high on Thunderfuck, we climbed up the fire ladder to the roof of the hotel and looked out over the wind-washed city, the cloistered ruins. And he was straight, but we were alarmed in the world and knew then of only one way to be alive. So he drew down his silk long johns, and I took him in my mouth, and from him I then sipped sound, the moon, the flocks of nightbirds calling. I let the language of flesh fill me from lips to throat, and when the Inquisitor flooded my mouth, I knew in thrilling despair that time is yet untestified. Water so far in the life of a human untraveled, and no answer would ever satisfy me, but heaven is this earth. The second poem that, thank you, Ode to the Blowjob, otherwise known as. This next poem and last poem that I'll read to you is called Pulse. To the sharp report in the dark, the season comes home. A long tongue of sound between hand and arm, between mouth and flesh. Hold this moment, this river, still. What if it was my life? To return after years to the same province of danger, an old town you know, like the handle, the bump stock, the trigger. I want to return to the boat that bore me from the far shore years ago. And what I lived in those languages I forgot. And the places I left, I want to return to. Were we seen? Were we spoken? Were all the wolves baying, met at the edge of the bright darkness of rain? Time cannot fulfill its promise to splinter, return, or slow. Vow this wheel, this we will, this wheel, we even wean, we in the world would wool the low vow fold, war and low at the hip, to be a solid soldier who soiled his souled soul for the chance to be the first to aim, first to fire, first to fly. In the crosshairs, I am heir to no oar to hold, because in this case, I am on both sides of the gun. Told to sound or cost, one that never ends and the other never returns. Any embrace is the first error in meaning's slope, wrought by thought that one could reach another, touch his shape, known in two genders, like Orlando, whose tongue newly woke to pronounce any word for God or man means to enter violence's fold. So no oath sworn now to save, no salvation, no salve, no valor, no ovation, no nation. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Joe and Kazim, for you. That's such moving poetry. This is a change of pace. It's a story, nonfiction story. It's a cat story. I always said I would never, but I did. It's called Alice is Calling. And it's from my new book with Red Hand, Touching Creatures, Touching Spirit, Living in a Sentient World. One day in 1972, my friend Alice began talking about wanting a cat. Let's go get you one, I suggested. No, the cat I want is a Russian blue, she said, rolling a cigarette and looking up at me out of the corner of her eye. Though I long admired this type of cat. I'd often gone to the cat show in San Francisco. The Russian blues had gorgeous fur, thick and short, matching their intense bodies, supple with compact muscles, while their eerie silvery gray coats contrasted with sudden round green eyes. Besides, Alice was pouring a cup of coffee. They are rare, not that easy to find. Let's look in the paper anyhow, I insisted, pushing some of the junk off the kitchen table to hunt for a recent edition. Oh, no, I just want to think about it a while. In the next few weeks, we repeated this conversation at least 3 times, and I couldn't understand her wall of resistance. Let's try the animal shelter, I would suggest, the pet store. No, I just want to think about it, do a little meditating. By March, some 6 weeks later, we opened the heavy oak front door for much of the day. The house was very big, 3 stories and 5 bedrooms. And I already had 2 cats, Marmalade, and her white-furred son, T-Bear. Marmalade had a slew of boyfriends coming around that season, though none dared come into the house. What did enter the house one afternoon, with the sturdy, swaggering motions of a little athlete, was a nicely muscled, short-haired, densely blue-gray cat with round green eyes. Look, Alice, I exclaimed when she came home from work. Here's your Russian blue, exactly as you wanted. He just walked right in the door. She looked at him suspiciously. He's not the right one, she said. What? He's perfect. Look at those eyes. He's not the one I had in mind, she said, and went upstairs to her room. I was flabbergasted. Hadn't Alice called him to come to her? I couldn't believe anyone could be so picky. And I was certain she didn't mean it. Here was the rare Russian blue, the answer to her description, and confirmation that she was correct. The world does have a psychic mind that responds to our deeply held desires. So I called the cat Charlie and fed him, certain she would come to recognize him as what she had requested. He stayed. Alice paid him no attention whatsoever, and I didn't spend much time with him either. He didn't seem to mind our indifference, having his own agenda, and shortly after began an intense love affair with our household cat, T-Bear. Though he was nearly 2 years old, I hadn't bothered to get him neutered because following the Siamese hormonal path, his testicles hadn't yet descended into their sacks of fur. T-Bear and Charlie lay on the living room floor in each other's arms all spring, washing and chuckling, rolling and rubbing.
Cassie!
On closer examination, I noticed their sensuality had gone further. Charlie frequently mounted the younger cat, gripping his white neck fur wetly to bump his stocky gray pelvis along T-Bear's raised backside. During their washing exercises, I could see thin pink penises protruding, revealing the eroticism of their play. They're lovers, I announced to Alice, thinking to rouse her from her indifference. Isn't that fascinating? It puts a whole new light on tomcat fighting. And I thought, here we are, all of us gay, even the cats. But Alice put her morning coffee mug between her elbows on the cluttered table and wrinkled her nose. I want a sweet little Russian blue female. That's all I'm thinking about in the way of cats. Irritated at her ingratitude and blind faith in the power of positive thinking, I went back to observing the living room lovers. But the morning I came upon Charlie pounding his round gray foot between the red ears on the top of T-Bear's head until the white cat's chin audibly smacked up and down on the wooden floor, I decided Charlie must go. On the eve of this decision, Alice swept triumphantly through the front door with a slender gray cat in her arms. Here she is, she cried. I'm going to call her Freddie. Incredulous, I went to look closely at the short-haired, blue-gray, year-old female Russian blue cat with the round green eyes. A woman down the block was holding her. When I told her that's just the cat I've been wanting, she gave her to me. Neither of the women seemed surprised to have found each other. And Freddie was a perfect friend for Alice, who arranged for friends in Sonoma County to take tough boy Charlie and get him fixed. But Alice's close companion, Freddie, was her confirmation that the world does have a psychic mind that responds to our deeply held desires. That's my story. And I'm sticking to it.
All right, now it's my turn. My name is Carlos Allende. I'm going to be reading from my upcoming novel, Coffee Shopping Murder Love, that will be published next year by Red Hen Press. I need to make a Southern accent that I cannot really make. I'm Mexican, so I have a strong Mexican accent. So I'm going to try my best. Traumatic incident from my childhood, number 42. When I am as sad as I am now, I tend to reflect on the reasons for my failure. Mr. Oldley, my music professor, flinching as if he had just been caught up and with a samurai sword at my attempts to reach a high note. I cannot sing. I know that now. Why? I sound vicious when I speak. A really deep vocal fry that soon transforms into a wailing crescendo. When I sing, I sound as if a drunken harpy had married a southern gentleman, which is not far from the truth. Ongainel has always referred to my mother as a drunken harpy because my mother, well, she likes her hooch, and she isn't always the kindest. While my father has a drawl so thick you could cut it with a knife and make yourself a sandwich. It makes you want to turn on the subtitles. But anyway, I digress. Where was I? Oh, yes. Sunk in the depths of despair, wearing these fabulous camo pants and these hyper chic hiking boots from Solomon Quest, 50% off at Neiman Marcus, but also without the lamp, on a very dark night, lost in the Mexican desert, wishing that I had never crossed paths with Jiménez, that I had never fallen in love with his wealth and with his ravishing South Asian skin color. Then agreed to become his accomplice. And remembering right after failure number 41, calling Mr. Connolly daddy in 4th grade, of the time when Mr. Oldley, that awful, horrible, terrible man, winced as if an eagle had been eating his entrails at my attempt to sing the Holy Raje so that I could be chosen for the school chorus. You would have thought that by the tender age of 10 and a half winters, having been called a fag since pretty much my first day at preschool, my self-esteem would have already developed a thick callus. Well, it hadn't. It hurt seeing him shudder. It hurt seeing my music professor dismiss me as if I had been some importunate beggar instead of a little girly boy full of enthusiasm, dreaming of one day becoming the next Kate Bush. Mr. Oldley's rejection should have prevented me from ending my act with a swirl. But I was already in character. I forgot that half my classmates had relatives in the Ku Klux Klan. Ouch! I keep bumping into this stupid cactus, a sweet southern baby Jesus, I cry. Will this be my demise? Will I die of hunger and thirst alone, or will a rattlesnake bite me first and put me out of my misery? No, I should have neither spun nor attempted a gymnastic curtsy, but after a whole 2 weeks wondering what should I sing so that my peers would be so impressed that they would stop spitting on my food in the cafeteria, and a full hour of really practicing, I couldn't just drop the invisible gown from the Queen of the Night to the floor, stick my tongue out, and scratch the back of my head like Tommy did when he too was rejected. He looked incredibly manly, yes, but I had to do my swirl. It was part of the act. It was necessary. Oh, talking about what's essential. I think that Charlie, that would be me, Charlie Hayward from Litchfield, Kentucky, at your service. I tried to go by Chuck in 7th grade, but it didn't go well. Boys didn't like it. I think that Charlie should stop here and take a rest. These boots are fabulous, but they weren't really my size. My feet hurt a little. Where would be a safe place to stop and die of infinite sadness? Traumatic incident number 56. I Jimenez, snuggling my head on the sand, being shoved into the girl's room, and once there, getting punched unconscious by Samantha Hogg. You would think that self-loathing doesn't help, but it actually does. Ask any gay person. It is as if when you're terribly sad and disheartened, as I am right now, waiting to die, lost and forgotten, betrayed by the man whom you hoped would pull you out of poverty, something inside your own body soothes you. The more you feel sorry for yourself, the better it feels. There's beauty in sadness. Why else would we keep watching reruns of All Yeller? It must have something to do with the chemicals in your brain. Self-pity is addictive. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Joe and Kazim and Judy and Carlos. I'm so happy to be reading with you and to be in conversation with you. I'm going to read a poem that I wrote for the trans and gender nonconforming students who were walking the stage at Lavender graduation when I worked in Texas. Spell for safety. Maybe it was you learning to walk home crosswise, your own safety valve. You who trained a tongue, chose a name, listening for reflection to speak back. You, I'm calling you, grew yourself at argument's end, slept borrowed and burned, who filled in space of the wisecrack, who emptied the sidewalk, who cleared the toxic table. You breathed down your own street, rose tall, stitched, built your own table, lit candles for the living who couldn't make it back. The invitations, the city, the hauntings, and the hatchets. The you walking home safe, opening the door, setting the table for company. I'm going to read all spells today. So another spell for safe passage. This is for Dao Feng, who we lost in the Atlanta shootings. No more underestimated ocean creature. No more headlong sea crossing. Your own boat and captain, your own staunch feet. Your voice so tough and shining, your brothers thought you should have been born a man. Better start working, they said, and find a husband. You chose assembly line and garment factory and no husband. Nail salon and beauty salon and no husband. Massage spa and no husband. Your own money ferreted across water to mother. Your own voice lifted for ancestor protections. Your own bones to be sung. And this last piece I'm going to read is called Dandelion Spell for Safety. And it's for another trans Asian American writer who I started to work with. And I wanted to write this particular writer a spell, and it's for Hui-Ying Bi-Chan. 1. A buzz in pool. Don't know what flame to be spilt, circling from your seedlings. You told only sliver once what command to live with stern center. We all tornado father, a house set against lingering, fall into support. 2. May you and your sunlights grow sturdy and seed and light-winged. Return tall stalk to moon and water and sun again. My body once passed to trick intruders. A bridge was unauthorized, but I worried, cut off, I'd stay stuck from central. We draw bits without a shadow and reassemble. 3. Thin line holding together, later pleasure, you use to delay a preservation, a storing, soft lines, we aren't of one mind. Sweat first, then joy, if at all. 4. One says we need a clear demarcation. May you and your questions bloom. Another says stretch and we can make room and receive what you sprout in abundance. 5. To become bird, trust your own radiant steady. Turn your back on what's gold, your own cherished sky. Turning back will reveal cartilage and soft tissue left between fractures. Turning back. Ask for what you need again, your own flown spore. Root water and thirst. You say, carry me to that memory place. That place I fell, then I cleansed in water, cleansed again. Nothing seems sway and sway to help and. Thank you. Now I'm excited to be in conversation with you all. And the obvious question, since we're at a virtual Pride event, I remember the origins of Pride as a rebellion and riot against police brutality led by Black and brown trans women. So I'd love to hear you, your reflections about what Pride means to you now. Let's start with Kazim.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah, okay. You know, it's a complicated question for me, Ching-In, because as a queer person of color of a certain age, and Muslim too, when I was younger and trying to wrestle with my own sexuality and identity, there was strong orientation at the time. This was pre-1993 March on Washington, pre-Paris is Burning, pre-Madonna's Truth or Dare movie, which was released widely in the theaters and featured, it was a concert tour documentary that at the time was path-breaking because in the behind-the-scenes kind of footage, it had a full conversation between Madonna's dancers, all of whom were gay except for one who was straight. And they were sitting around this table having this conversation about being gay men, and in their community, they were all queer men of color, including the straight guy who was a man of color too. They were talking about wrestling with coming out in their communities. This was like the first, I shouldn't say first, but it was one of the earliest and biggest mainstream kind of interrogations of gay identity since the AIDS crisis in the 80s. You know, there was a discourse, a much queerer discourse actually in gay liberation, queer liberation in the 70s. And then the country swung to the right so badly in the 80s. Many of us, and Judy Grahn is our, legendary foremother, foreparent, and can speak to this better than I can, but as a young, 16, 17-year-old, this was like a time of terror and death. And so Pride meant, we have this critique of Pride around, corporate capitalism and around whiteness and whatever it is, but it was a lifeline to have that party, to have that joy, to have that, it was different, I think. All of the critiques that exist now, I think, are, they should be there, and they should be interrogated critically. But I don't know, it was like I could breathe sort of in those spaces. And the space of the gay bar, quote unquote, or lesbian bar, quote unquote, and they were exclusive and for the most part segregated and separate spaces, but they were like holy places. I mean, it was like you would go through your day. In my day, the Gay and Lesbian Alliance, which is what it was called when I was an undergrad in college, the meetings weren't advertised. You had to drop a note off at the office in the campus center, and then someone would write a note back to you to tell you when and where it was meeting. I mean, it was not safe. As much as it's not safe now, it was not safe. And so to have those exclusive spaces was, you know, incredibly important for all of us. But at the same time, I do want to say, as a man of color, as a Muslim person, the discourse around coming out as the goal, that was not there for me. I wanted the support of spaces, but I was in no hurry to do that kind of political, coming out as a political act. It was just a little more complicated, you know, in the culture I was raised in and, you know, what I was contending with. So it took me a long time I did not come out to my family. I lived openly in my own public life for a long time, but I came out to my parents when I was 36 years old. So it's different for me than even my own students now who are like, you know, out at 14, 12, 7,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, I think I really resonate with that as I'm a parent to a trans young person, and it feels like you know, the landscape that they're coming of age is really different. I'd love to hear Judy. I'd love to bring you into the room and hear your thoughts about about Pride and about today's landscape.
Oh yeah, you know, I'm of such an age, you know, 8 decades of it, and I came out into a world of silence and brutal, just brutality and hypocrisy towards, you know, I mean, closeted gay people were set up to be punitive toward all of us. And you couldn't even say any of the words pertaining to us couldn't even be said. The words were secret. And then to join Mattachine Society, and I'm so grateful for Harry Hay for having founded that, and he was influenced by, I think, being around Navajo people, to understand the importance of culture, and picketing the White House, and you know how scary that was, and how strange it seemed. Like who cared, who was paying any attention, what could we possibly do? And then finding that what we could possibly do was to get together with each other and see that we weren't ugly, that we actually were beautiful, and to be with other gay poets, you know, and that we could have a voice, and there would be people show up to hear it. And then when the parade started, and it wasn't a month, it was, you know, a day, it was a parade day, and that was just all of a sudden public presence, and all of a sudden the very thing we were most afraid of, which was to tell other people that we were queer in any way, was the ammunition that we needed. This was the ground. This was how you made the land that we could stand on, was by being out. Not everybody could do that with any amount of safety, but once there was solidarity and community, then there could be open pride. And once there was open pride, the parents got into it because they felt safer. The churches got into it, those that could, you know, because they felt safer, and so on. So it's so opposite when you walk toward your fear and do what you can toward it, that is often where your power is. That's what I learned from it all. And I'm astounded that it continues, really.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Joe or Carlos, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, I'm unmuted, so I'll go first. Well, I'm hoping I'm the last generation. I mean, all of us here that were born in a time where we thought we would never marry or be with the person we love because of who we were, and now everything suddenly changed, slowly, but now we can all get married.
Not suddenly.
No, slowly. I meant slowly. I said
with a lot of hard, dedicated, devoted work.
Yeah, well, that's where I'm going. Many of us just jumped on the wagon. A lot of people did the hard work things change slowly, but it may have felt fast, and that's what I'm writing on my book about two guys who are the last generation that were married. My book is set 1 year before gay marriage became legal in the U.S. So we are the last generation that were born in a time where we thought we would never be able to marry, and then things change, and things are very slowly at first, but now they sped up, and now young people can come out whenever they want. Not everyone, but it's much, much, much better than before. I live in Santa Monica, the little Southern California bubble. I know that not everybody has it as good as I do or as we have, but things have changed dramatically. One thing that I wanted to reflect to is that, and that's also a subject of my book, is what do we do with all that anger? Like, so you were raised thinking that you were wrong, that you were not worthy of aspiring to be loved or to marry or be happy. And then, not suddenly, but it felt kind of suddenly, things changed. And now it is okay to be gay, and it's okay to marry and all that. And young people are having it fine, and you are of a certain age in which you never had that. So I'm happy. I'm very happy that as much as we criticize companies taking advantage of pride and stuff, that's what we wanted. We wanted it to be like as common as Christmas. We wanted it to be as equal and boring and commercial as everyone else. So even if we are a little bit nostalgic of the old times, I think it's fantastic that companies are jumping on the wagon and all that. But again, we're going back to the anger subject. What do we do with all that anger and resentment that we felt for all these years? And suddenly we're supposed to feel happy because things became better. And it became better. But what do you do with all that? So I'm passing the ball now to Joe.
Well, for me, I think a couple of things. Like the first thing that comes to mind is the joy, especially seeing, even if it's as tried as a pride display at my local grocery store where they're selling rainbow flags and they're selling little banners. There's something magical for me seeing a little kid walk by that display, a little 5 or 6 year old, and stopping to stare. And for me, whatever critique I have about HEB grocery stores selling pride to make money, there's that little kid walking in front of the display looking and feeling affirmed and feeling magical. And I can definitely appreciate that. On a personal note, I think a lot of times for me, walking into pride spaces, and I love the big party scenes. I'm not going to lie. Give me a DJ, give me stuff, and I'm happy. But I sometimes forget, and I feel very ashamed of forgetting that there are people who are supposed to still be here. And they would be living their life, and they would be loving it. And they're not here. And I think taking that moment to be grateful for what I have, but also to recognize that there are other people who should be here and they're not. And that for me is that's the friction, feeling the joy and feeling that they're getting it, and then feeling that sadness too from time, and reminding myself that it's okay to feel, or I should be feeling that recognition that that it's not just about joy and pride and celebration. There also is that moment to recognize that that there are people who should still be here, period.
Yeah, several of you have talked about, a lot of the efforts. A lot of people have put in a lot of work to make, to make things better. And it's still not better for all. So I'm wondering, I would love to hear if there are any community-led efforts that you all want to lift up that you think is important to spotlight in this moment. Or any underappreciated writers who have really made a big difference, in your life, or you think people should know about and read. I would love to hear that. Maybe I will. Can we go backwards? Can I tap you, Joe, to go first?
Sure. I'm gonna grab a book off my shelf.
Okay. Awesome.
Ching-In, could I jump in?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Hi. So I just want to say, a couple of you mentioned the, 2015. Can you hear me? Okay, there's a truck.
Yeah, I can hear you.
The 2015 marriage equality decision. I mean, when that happened, that was certainly incredibly amazing. But it was not as a more like conservative people who are interested in Supreme Court activism and are opposed to Supreme Court activism will point out, and I think it's a valuable argument for us to internalize, is that decision did not come about through majority legislative effort, popular vote type of decision. It came about through judicial decision, which is great when the judiciary agrees with us. It's not so great when the judiciary doesn't. And the threat of that decision was that there would be a social backlash to it. And I remember a conversation I had with Marilyn Hacker when that happened. We were talking about how quickly a society falls apart. We were talking about Syria, because Marilyn, if you know, she works a lot in the Arab world and translating writers. And at the time, she had previously mostly translated Francophone writers from the Arab world, but she was now learning Arabic. So she was spending a lot of time in Syria. She lives in Paris, so she was going back and forth. And she said that society was the most progressive, most secular, most like modern, and it fell apart fast. And we were talking about, I said it, I couldn't believe it. And she said, this decision, people are going crazy about it. And it could have, what happened in Syria could happen in America. Everything could fall apart quickly.
Yeah.
And she said the other people are the ones with the guns. So, I mean, it was like we were being a little apocalyptic. And yet, what happened in 2016?
Yeah.
And we're still in the middle of it. I mean, yes, we took back the White House, and we have like the skin of our teeth Senate majority, which almost doesn't matter right now. And we took back the White House by the smallest margins, even after 4 years of degradation and destruction and, rank stupidity. We still only won back that White House by like this much of a margin, so precarious. So we're still in that moment of that backlash. There's still the battle, we cannot forget to be warriors. So when you ask me like what other movements, when we got involved, we, meaning like the queer community broadly speaking, got involved in those main issues of the 90s, the signature issues were a heterosexual oriented family structure, marriage equality, equal rights to serve in the military, and ability to have access for healthcare for the domestic partnership, instead of the more radical queer issues of, say, universal healthcare. Why can't we all? Why do single people are not entitled to healthcare as a queer spouse? Do you get where I'm going with this, right? So I don't feel like giving in right now because some of those rights, those are civil rights. This was a difference that the Black community confronted in the 1960s. This was the divide between Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. Malcolm X's critique of the civil rights movement was, you just want a space at the white man's table, while Black people around the world, you're just content to let them suffer, instead of a more radical view of what liberation could be. So I think, for me personally, that is where the queer community needs to go, in that direction.
Yes.
Liberation for Black people, liberation for women, for trans people, and internationally around the world, the decolonial and anti-colonial movement.
Yeah. Yes, I totally agree with you. I think that is so important, that is where solidarity, and then you expand it to be inclusive. And you use your anger in behalf of social justice for everybody. And you use your anger for writing things, that make a difference. I'll keep the book that I would bring up doesn't seem all that political, but education is just so important. And one of the things that we are called, we're called sinful on the one hand, and then we're called unnatural on the other. And it was wonderful to me to see the work of Bruce Bagamill. I'm sure I'm just mispronouncing his name, but he gathered naturalist information that had been hidden. The biologists were hiding what they were actually seeing about nature because of homophobia. and anti-trans sentiment. But in reality, a great deal of nature is transsexual, is homosexual, is, that there are all manner of male to male relationships that go on, and female bonding where they raise the kids. And the ideology of nature as heteropatriarchal is false. And so, and the same thing with biblical things. I've been exploring pre-biblical texts where there are homosexual bonding and transsexual sacredness in the text, right in the same texts that were incorporated into biblical stories. It's just that the homophile piece of it was left out along with the female deity. So anyway, all I'm saying is there is lots to do, and the education is a really important part of it. I don't think that should stop in favor of more surface and more immediate issues. That there's the deeper questions, and I really appreciate you bringing them up.
Yeah, I would like to add something to that. It is very important, formal education, but also informal education, informal exposure. Many times our attitudes are created because we think that the world is that way. When I was a child, even if I knew I was gay, I didn't think it was right for a man to marry another man, not because I didn't want that, it's because that's how I thought the world worked. So when we see companies praising pride, when we see commercials with gays, when we see movies with lesbians, when we see trans people on the screen, on miniseries, movies, etc., we don't need big explanations. We can use those explanations, but at that moment, a big explanation of how nature works is unnecessary. Just by seeing, yeah, there are gay people in the world, there are trans people, there are lesbians, there are all kinds of stuff. If you are exposed from that from a very young age, you start thinking of it as normal. And you don't, even if it's helpful to have scientific explanations, you may not need them to understand the world, because your attitude will be like, oh, that's how the world works. Some men marry women, some men marry men.
Yeah.
That's it.
Okay, Joe, I want to pass the mic to you.
Sure.
Tell us the book that you had in mind.
I was just going to share this book written by Joseph Delgado. He's a Chicanx writer from the desert. And one of the reasons that I highlight this book, particularly in a conversation about pride, is I really appreciate the way this writer articulates his brownness, and not so much in the and the queerness, not so much in a shape or a form that is easily recognizable. I think it's easy sometimes to see, oh, well, that's gay, or this is what gay means. But to really appreciate and find respect for just speaking what the body wants to speak in a way that is connected to land, or that isn't hygienic and civilized, but just actually is what is it, what the soft animal of the body wants. To go back to Mary Oliver, who I actually absolutely love. But with this guy, Joseph Delgado, I really think there's a dirtiness to his writing that I think gets lost sometimes in the conversations about what pride can be and should be, particularly when there's money involved, or when there's positions or power or hierarchies. So that's my piece, just embracing this idea that recognizing queerness and all its articulations. For me personally, I am biased more towards the ones that get the bad names or the dirty looks, whether it's the leather crowd or whether it's the poor people acting up at Pride and ruining it for everybody. Whatever the argument is, I think there's a place for the non-cleaned up version of Pride, and that's what I would like to promote.
Right. Say his name again, the author?
The book is Broken Mesas. His name is Joseph Delgado.
Okay. Thank you.
So I'd love to hear, since we're all queer writers, how did you become a writer? How did you know that you could be a writer? How did you start to write about queer issues or queer lives in your work? And I'm going to leave it open to whoever wants to pick it up.
I'm going to jump in. Well, when I started writing, I was still in the closet. And I remember I was writing this historical novel set in Mexico during the War of Reform. And long story short, I was living in Belgium and then in Holland. And I was thinking like, oh my God, I'm like seeing all these guys. And when I'm a famous writer, I will I will be in the closet and these people are going to come and blackmail me or something. That was as late as 2000 and 2001. And even if it was no big deal in Holland, I was still in the closet. Long story short, I mean, because that's how you're raised. You think you're wrong, and not only society has to change, you have to change. And I think the internet was what we gaze, and Black people and women, and thanks to the internet, thank you internet, because that changed our lives. We realized that we were not alone, and so my writing started to change a little bit. My second novel was still mostly about straight people, but I had a gay vampire, and he was, in the original version, he was just a straight vampire. But then I thought, I want to make him flamboyant, and I want to make him say horrible things in a Queenie voice.
Yes.
And by then, I was already out of the closet, and so my latest novel, I would say, is a 100% gay. My characters are gay from the very beginning, and I think my work, it's a little bit what is the word? Autobiographical. Not really the story, but the plot. You can read some stuff like that. My first book was about being a young adult in my 20s. My second book was a mixture of childhood and young adult, and now this book that is coming out is about what it means to be queer in your 40s, when the world is changing. The world is getting to, it's said before gay marriage became legal, but the world is changing. You're out of the closet. You can be yourself, but you have learned all of your life that you're worthless. And one of my characters is angry and bitter and jealous, and he does very bad things. And the other one is superficial, pushover, and he's waiting to be rescued. And I think, I don't know if that's only my case. I think it's a little bit of myself as well. You can be angry and bitter and jealous of other people, and at the same time, you feel incompetent, and you're waiting for the prince to come and rescue. And you have to realize that the only prince that will ever come is yourself, and you have to become the prince that will rescue, or the princess. That's my writing experience.
Anyone else want to jump in?
Oh, I will, because I just owe a debt to Frank Kameny, who was leading Washington Mattachine Society at the time that I belonged to it. And I was 25. I already knew how to write, but I didn't know why to write. There was no wagon to hitch my star to. And then he was telling us, you know, besides picketing the White House and being political in that kind of sort of skinny way, we needed to be critiquing the psychiatric establishment, because it had categorized us all as mentally ill, and it was very important to undo that. So the first two pieces that I wrote after that, and one of them was published then, and one of them was published 5 years later, had to do with that kind of critique. The Psychoanalysis of Edward the Dyke is a satire about a dyke going to a psychiatrist, and it has both trans and lesbian elements to it, and as well as showing the psychiatric. They just simply did not see us with any kind of clarity whatsoever. He thought I was a gay man. He was just, who hung out in parks. And, anyway, I feel gratitude for Frank for directing me, because then I had a train to ride, and pretty soon I was hitching to several different movements. I was hitching my work, and I have found that to be a really valuable way to do it, to think, what are the movements that can make use of any educational stuff that is in this work, and that can carry it on. The Psychoanalysis of Edward the Dyke remains in print. That was 55 years ago that I first put it down, and it remains in print, not because it's some fabulous piece of literature, but because conditions haven't changed enough and haven't changed for enough people. So there's still a lot more to do, which is really good news for writers. No sense being alienated in any way. Just grab a star and hitch on.
Thanks, Judy. That's a really great point, that there's a role for writers to make social change, and to lift up things that are going on, things that have been going on, and also to kind of reimagine what we can be doing as a society. Joe, I'd like to tap you.
Oh, sure. Recently, I've been writing young adult fiction. I teach high school, and so a writer who I have a lot of respect for talked to me about what I was working on, and I was kind of like, didn't know how to explain it because I didn't really believe in it. And she goes, well, why don't you make a list of your 10, or Sandra Cisneros, she goes, make a list of your 10, right? Write down the 10 things that you can talk about, and you can talk about it in a way that only you can talk about it. Like, what are these things that you know about life? So I made my list, and it's like Ariana Grande, right? Because I love her. And then I'm like, okay, Drag Race, I love that. Fake Friends, know a lot about it. So that's what I started with. And then I thought to myself, well, there's a story I want to tell, and there's kids like me who could possibly, potentially, maybe a lot, be yearning for a story about our lives that could be meaningful in a way that talks about race and social class and gender in ways that we don't get in a high school classroom traditionally. And so that's where I am with my writing. I didn't grow up wanting to be a writer. I just fell into the conversation because I wanted to belong. And I think that sense of belonging in literature can provide that to people the way it provided for me way back in 1994. I hope to, with the things that I make, to create that sense of belonging and to invite people to the conversation and to nurture voices in a similar way that mine has been nurtured.
I love that. Yeah. And Kazim, passing the torch to you.
So when I was a young lad growing up in Western New York, I went to a predominantly white high school, although I did feel some sense of like cultural alienation, both as a Muslim growing up in the 1980s and as also a non-white person. And the first, I guess, anthology of non-white writers I ever read was an anthology called The Black Poets, edited by, what was his name? Dudley Randall, I think, edited that book.
Oh, Dudley Randall, yeah.
Did you know him? Did you know who?
No, all he was, he published Audrey and Sonia, and maybe Nick Giovanni. I mean, he was really great. Yeah.
So, yeah, all of those writers became so important to me because they were using English that was like unusual, against the grain of what I'd normally experience. In particular, Mari Evans had some poems in that book that were really striking to me. And so I knew that I wanted to explore the writings of Black writers. There was a lot of publishing of their work and promoting in those days. And in particular, I came across the work of Pat Parker, who was lesbian, Black, politically radical,
Yeah.
And her book, Jonestown and Other Madness,
Totally.
became very, very influential on me, not just craft-wise as poetry, but also in its like direction and political intentions. And I felt very much ushered into the world by those writers. So I owe a huge debt to them. Certainly there were Asian American writers and other, queer writers who became important to me, but my groundswell of how I came to really understand that I, as someone on the outside in the margins, could access English in a way fresh other than like my own English, that I could bring that into the dominant mainstream forms of English that existed. It came from reading Mari Evans and precisely those poets you mentioned, Judy, Nikki Giovanni, Mari Evans, Sonia Sanchez, 100%, her first book, Homecoming in particular, later Lucille Clifton when I went away to college. But Pat Parker was probably the first, really.
Well, she was inspirational to everybody who knew her, including Audrey, and certainly including me, because she was just so forthright. And there was just no BS, there was just like, let's get to the point, and then let's poeticize it in some way that people will not forever forget the phrase, like Black people do not commit suicide. That being the refrain of her so brilliant account of Jonestown. Absolutely unforgettable.
Yeah. I still remember those poems, the uncle had quote unquote committed suicide in prison. And she was saying at that time, she was naming it. Now, in Sandra Bland's case and all these other cases,
yes,
know that this is not what happened.
That's correct. That's right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I feel like this conversation has been really generative, generous. I loved hearing all your work. And I love the range of the work that we heard today. And just wondering if there's any last words you want to leave the audience with, especially if they're, maybe folks just starting out on their journey.
I want to say something that I wanted to say to a friend on Twitter, but I knew she was going to get mad, so I'm just going to throw it here. There's a lot of people on Twitter angry at J.K. Rowling, but I never see them, J.K. Rowling, the writer of Harry Potter, I never see them promoting any trans writers or any gay writers or any lesbian writers. So instead of spreading, canalize your anger, and instead of attacking her because you don't agree with her, promote the work of people you agree with.
Yes.
Promote the work of trans writers, or get to know it, or stuff, and don't canalize your anger in a different way. That's my comment.
I would like to thank the staff of Black Market Cafe that has put up with me taking over their backspace to broadcast with you.
So happy to meet you.
That's pandemic life. I mean, that's pandemic life. I don't know if you could hear the storm going on. It felt like everything was, all the walls are going to fall
and
in.
They want to go home for the day, so I'm going to say goodbye, everybody, but I will see you soon.
Well,
okay?
on that note, thank you all, and thank you Red Hen Press and Santa Monica Cultural Affairs, and I think we're going to say goodbye.
Okay. Thank you all.
Bye.
Yeah, thank you all so much.
You guys were amazing. It was so great to hear you all.
That was amazing. Thank you so much. Hold on. We'll see you just after the show. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. You can pick up the work from all these incredible authors at the link in the chat, and you can get 30% off using the code Beach Culture. Keep an eye out for pre-order links for Carlos's Coffee Shopping Murder Love very soon, coming out next year. And join us again tomorrow for another Hen House at Home event featuring Cecile Barlier, Carl Markham, and Dexter Booth, which I will be moderating. Thank you again for joining us tonight, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Bye. Thank you.